Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music, biggest hater in the world, Duke of Italy, and welcome to the first ever 2023 Nothing But Black Metal November update video. We got this one locked and loaded. Let's get it. To recap, we got a whole bunch of albums this month. Specifically, I picked out 60 to listen to beforehand, and I'll be honest, I've been listening to some bonus ones just to give myself more stuff to listen to. And for the first time this year, at the end of the fourth video, I'll just give you a bunch of bonus ones. The first year I did it, I gave you two. One was the new Archgoat, and one was the new Reverorum Malocht. And last year I did a Tra bonus, whatever the heck. And I did the bonuses that are great to replace the ones I didn't like from that year. But this year, I'm planning on adding just every bonus of something that I liked a lot. And I've already got like 6 I'm looking at right now. So, you know, I got plenty of stuff planned. And also to recap, the stuff that we are covering this year includes a bunch of essential Greek black metal albums. Not all of them, but I'm trying to get a good scope of the scene here, and a lot of the bonus albums will include those as well as the replacements. And also I'm covering the entire Paysage d'Hiver demo catalog, as long as it's black metal. I haven't covered any of their splits. I'm thinking next year maybe I'll cover Schnee, maybe. Maybe at some point I'll cover Involved again. I don't like Geister, so I don't think I would return to that one. But let's just begin, because since I'm on the subject of Paysage d'Hiver, we're starting off with, of course, Paysage d'Hiver's Steinek, or Steineke. I don't know how you pronounce it, but what matters about this thing is that it is super, super cool. We're starting off the month with just one of the coldest bands, one of the coolest albums, and it's so cool. It is equally powerful and emotional. It is insane sounding. It's beautiful. It's very intelligently written. It is simultaneously dark and cold. Not every Paysage d'Hiver listen feels dark and cold, and honestly, you can kind of pit it to the album covers if it feels dark or not. This one feels dark. Some of the albums don't feel as dark. They all have sort of a lonely experience to the whole thing, but so they all have a bit of a different angle to them. And I feel like I really have to get into these nitty-gritty little differences, because I'm going to be talking about so many different Paysage d'Hiver demos here, and they all have a little bit of something different. Some of them do sound a good amount like the other ones. They all have very similar production styles, with a little bit of leeway here and there, very similar riffing styles, but it kind of depends on what other extra element they throw in here. And for Steinek, you get 3 main songs as well as a bonus track that really only appeared on the original demo version of this album here. And what's cool about this album is, of these 3 songs, they translate to The Tree Man, The Tree Woman, and The Tree. The Tree being like the longest track here. It's like this big dungeon synth blackened ambient piece of music here. It's really cool. It's really daunting. One thing that's really cool about this album is one of the most mystical Paysage d'Hiver albums. It feels very magical. It's so monolithic, and yet it doesn't feel like domineering, which we'll get to the more domineering stuff when we reach the end of the discography with Das Tor. But here it's just staring you straight in the face. It feels very organic, very lifelike, very interesting. And on The Tree Woman, which I will be referring to it as The Tree Woman, it is this giant piece of blackened death doom, and it is just so crushing. And if you know Paysage d'Hiver, you know they will do one riff for like a really, really long time, and here it's very similar, except it's just the heaviest, filthiest death doom, but covered in a thick layer of ice. And it's like you get this like snowy tree bark that's, I can't even explain the imagery here, because it's just so unique and alien. It's like bizarre, but it's awesome. The 4th track, Deja Vu, which doesn't show up in the original one, is another ambient track. It's excellent. I think it could have been added to the end there, but I do like the sort of conceptual roundness of Tree Man, Tree Woman, and the Tree. But the opening track, you get like this really interesting, progressing, more black metal track. It's pretty standard for Paysage d'Hiver, but it's among some of the greatest styles of that stuff. It works really well for what it is. It is just a flurry of stuff, all gas, no breaks. And then it drifting into The Tree Woman, which is just this giant doom-laden section. It's got so much action going on here, and it's really, really captivating. And it gives you such an interesting perspective when it all comes together for The Tree. I think it's a beautiful release here. Paysage d'Hiver starts strong with what I think is one of their best releases ever. I think Steinek is great. No apologies there. And of course, we're going to keep the discography rolling with the next Paysage d'Hiver release, Schottengang. Schottengang is not one of the best Paysage d'Hiver releases. In fact, I would say it is maybe the most normal Paysage d'Hiver release out there. Like, it's not too far in any particular direction. It's basically how kind of like what you'd expect with Paysage d'Hiver if you're so used to them. But at the time, this thing was probably insane. That being said, there's still plenty here to enjoy, as little as it innovates on itself. I think compared to Steinek, it does innovate a little bit. I just think compared to something like Self-Titled, it doesn't go super far. But what's cool about it, I think the thing that really makes this one different is there are some more thicker low end on this one. Paysage d'Hiver does have some albums with a really thick bass section, usually pretty minimalist, but on this one it's almost a little bit groovy, and the way it just repeats and repeats and repeats, it almost does like kind of something like Swans might do, where it just gets twisted and really interesting. I think it is a sublime idea. The second track here might just be my favorite. It's progressive, it's innovative, and it goes through like 5 different sections, and they all have different layers. And that is something about Paysage d'Hiver I like a lot, is so many of these songs can seem super repetitive, but it's not going to be one riff for 26 minutes. You're going to get like a 1-second intro that goes into like a 5-minute just whirl of blast beats, and then like a lower Death Doom section. Then you'll get like something more Dungeon Synth-esque, and it just revs up the whole thing again for a different section. So Roth or Winter or whatever you call the guy behind Paysage d'Hiver, all these albums are about Paysage d'Hiver, which translates to Frozen World, I believe. It's about his own personal mind and his own like journey through his own like perspective. It's really interesting how it works like that. So every album is different conceptually, how it all goes through these different parts of this like really depressed, isolated subconsciousness. And this release here also has some really cool ambient tracks, some of the better ambient tracks in the whole discography. It's really cool. This is like amongst their like bottom releases, but Paysage d'Hiver is so airtight of a discography. I think it's still great, honestly. And then we reach a popular band's less popular pick with Paysage d'Hiver's Kerker or Kerker, translates to dungeon or jail. I busted out a little bit of extra research for Winter. But what's interesting about this one, I don't like it as much as Schattengang. It is probably the lowest you can get in the discography before you're like a rank lower. It is super, super raw. It is filthy raw. It is like the rawest thing they've ever dropped. And that's a cool thing about it, because now you get basically like a mix between like Marshall Industrial. You get some hints of like even noise there, ambient noise wall. It is like good luck discerning the bass. The drums are just thick. It's everything is so lo-fi. It's really interesting because like tracks like the first one, the more grindy, heavy, doomy sections feel a bit more Marshall. And this whole album feels like there's just marching going ahead of you over the top of your head. It's really weird and interesting and honestly kind of hostile. This is one of the darkest Paysage d'Hiver releases for sure. The first song is a bit generic for the band, making it probably my least favorite track on the album, but I still think it's pretty good. It is very much a solid Paysage d'Hiver track, very isolating, very daunting. And track 2, kind of like Steinek, honestly, is just this very guttural death doom. It's very filthy. It is even more repetitive than the track off of Steinek, which makes it, this is the one that was Marshall that I was referring to earlier, that is just so military-esque. It feels so threatening. It's almost like ghosts marching past you, like some ghost army. Because what's really cool about Paysage d'Hiver, you never expect another conscious thing out there. It really feels like everything out to get you is your mind or the nature. So anything that feels like another living being, it's like it doesn't really feel like a living being. Like it has to be some sort of illusion here. And this one is like your own mind attacking you. The third track here is this really warped ambient track. It's maybe the darkest ambient track we get in the whole discography. And overall, the hostile atmosphere of this thing is really cool. And I think as raw as it is, I still think it's very strong. I think this is a great demo or album. I would call it either, really. I think it's up to snuff to be an album, but it's really great stuff. I think it's absolutely worth listening to. And then we're going to take a little bit of a break from Paysage d'Hiver as we dive into an EP from a band that is half German, half Brazilian. This is GGUW with Behauptung Sanimalitat, which is a cool band that has concepts about gravity and going so far into your bestial animal instincts to break laws of gravity, which is insane. And this release sounds just as insane as that sounds right there. It is a raw black metal release here, but it's cleaner than you'd expect. The production is raw, but it's not like raw black metal that is like indiscernible. It's not as like horridly produced. It is all very well composed to be this threatening thing here. As you can tell by this album cover here, this thing is hostile. Super simple dissonant riffs. Honestly, imagine mixing Lurker of Chalice, Deathspell Omega, and Orchid, the Screamo band. That's the kind of riffs we're dealing with here, and they sound perfect. And there's a huge ambient portion of this EP here that is sandwiched between this really scary and raw black metal, which I think is such an interesting combination, how it's got this like really ominous ambient track. It doesn't feel like filler at all, and that is the thing a lot of black metal bands fail to do, is make a dungeon synth or ambient piece that feels not like filler. Paysage d'Hiver can do it really well, as it kind of gets really well woven in. Tra does it well as well, and GGUW also hits it out of the park. The vocals switch between this sort of like mentally shattered moaning or like proper screamo vocals, which absolutely manic stuff. This is one of the most hostile things I've ever heard. One of the coolest black metal releases I've ever heard. Unfortunately, one of the members of this band died, and after they only released 2 EPs and a compilation of the 2 that you can purchase on CD, I'm kind of looking at getting a copy myself. I haven't heard the other EP, but I'm sure it's great if this is anything to wage off of. So this thing's great. It's got tons of character. It's so interesting. And following that, we're back on the ice train. We get to Paysage d'Hiver's self-titled. It is very icy, but it is far more acceptable production than Care, which is a huge plus. I mean, the raw production was getting a little bit much at points on Care, and you get a lot more interesting progression here. This is like, as much as it is self-titled, which makes it it's kind of a statement saying it's like, this is the Paysage d'Hiver record here, because like it is. It actually works really well. The imagery and the sound very much sounds exactly like Paysage d'Hiver should be, and that you get the concept just on this album cover. Look at you got the guy right there. That is like one of the only living creatures, except for the dude on Care, that you see on this thing. So it shows how isolating it is. I think the meager riffs we get, the more minimalist style riffs that have been going on here, get a decent upgrade. I think their chord progressions have become more dramatic and interesting and even manic. It is seriously worth the hype. Every last section is just as cold and just as grim as the last. And as slow moving as it is, it's actually a very gratifying listen. And the last track here is really cool. It's got these string samples that are just melting through the ice. It's really, really interesting. A nice isolating release here. Maybe the most iconic Paysage d'Hiver release for a good reason. It very much is as fitting for the sound as it could possibly be. It's great, and I don't know why anyone would be surprised. And if you want a little bit more of a progressive take that has a bit more of a linear progression to the whole thing, that's even technically one song. And if Paysage d'Hiver was ever to have a live band, I would love to end with just this whole album. I'd say Paysage d'Hiver's Crystal and Issa is the release to do the job, because this thing is banging. You got like 7 tracks, the shortest Paysage d'Hiver tracks to date, even including their last album, and yet some that are still 10 through 14 minutes. And every track from one to the next goes into each other in this really linear, really cool way. And you've got stuff that's more dungeon synth. You got more traditional ambient. You got some field recording stuff in here, which is all standard for them, but like, the fact that it's all linear and it like doesn't repeat itself too much as it goes into the next pieces, that's what's so cool about it. And the black metal stuff here is perfectly produced. It sounds phenomenal. It is maybe the best mixing on a Paysage d'Hiver project ever. But it is a shorter release. It's under 50 minutes, so that's honestly short for a Paysage d'Hiver release. And that's it's nice. It gives you a really nice linear progression to digest in one sitting, and it's one that isn't as daunting as their next projects. It might not be as heavy as an album such as Care, but it's actually feels just as hostile in this really interesting way, as it's very much the elements on this one. It feels very much like the snow and the wind is what's attacking you here. It is maybe the most cold and most wintry release you get here. This one and Winter Cult are up there for just some of the coldest black metal. It's also extremely ominous, and that's kind of where the hostility seems to be bred from, which I think is a super interesting take, which is interesting because this album cover is easily the least hostile Paysage d'Hiver release. It looks so cozy out there. I mean, very cold, but it looks cozy. And I just love how it's so ominous with this thing. It's like you expect there to be something in there, like you think something's out there, and It's dope. The final track is this 12-minute conclusion of black metal. It feels like icicles coating your skin. It's sharp. It's angular. It's freaking awesome. Go listen to this one. This might be my favorite Paysage d'Hiver release. Just saying. And if that didn't clarify it enough, it's great. I'm glad we're on a roll of the great stuff. I mean, it'll end at some point. All good things must come to an end. But, we got the riffs on deck. But now for something completely different, as if GGUW wasn't completely different. Reek of the Unzen Gas Fumes, Buddha Composted Pond. If you don't know Reek of the Unzen Gas Fumes, get out of my face right now, because this band is sick. If you like riffs and the most aggressive stuff you've ever heard, if you like grindcore or like industrial or like cyber grind, this is what you get, man. This band is nothing but bangers. If you think bands like Immortal have bangers, dude, Reek of the Unzen Gas Fumes, that's a band for you. This band's got so many bangers, it's not even funny. This is a band of a dude that just hates Buddhism for some reason. I don't know what his deal with it is, but he's in Japan. He's Japanese, so I mean, he's got more of a perspective on it than me. Not justifying it either way. But this is just a 10-minute demo, and wow, it's an assault. If you know these guys from the self-titled full-length album, the only full-length album that Reek of the Unzen Gas Fumes has ever made, you know them for just nothing but like breathless aggression, like super straightforward, almost caveman riffs. Actually, caveman riffs, if I remember correctly. It's just blistering to the end. And here it's a little bit different, because as much as it's like you got some death grind and some grindcore, it's some industrial, and it's just punching you in the face, you get some riffs. You get some real riffs in here, and they're sick. A bit sickening too. I mean, these dudes' vocals are just like so all over the place. Very much grindcore influenced vocal performance. There's even parts of here that's got like a mini breakdown section. There's a D-beat section. Yeah, it's actually just under 10 minutes, but it is sickeningly violent. Like, I actually listened to this specifically on a day that I was just not feeling very good, just trying to get myself back in the game, and it kind of almost did it. But geez, it's great. It's seriously awesome. It's one of the shortest releases I'll ever cover on this series, but I think it's totally worth your time. I haven't heard everything this band has done. I know their splits are more often than not kind of garbage, because the other bands they work with are just kind of not very good people, and more importantly, they just make like really half-hearted harsh noise. But if you want some good harsh noise, some good grind, some good industrial metal, and real industrial metal, none of that Rammstein, who cares about them? This is real music here. It's Reek of the Unzen Gas Fumes. And then we cover our first Greek release. It's from Cyprus, so it's Hellenic, kind of, Hellenistic, vaguely. I'm kind of counting it. Sorry if that's a little insensitive. It's Mediterranean. It's close to Greece. I don't know, but what doesn't matter? It's Godblood, Those Funeral Times. And if you thought we were gonna stop now with the bangers, you were so wrong, because this thing. Dude, this makes like Grand Black Hills Key look like so plain and boring in comparison. I love this thing. If you want like a GBK that's like not actually evil, then this is your band. Actually, I don't know their political beliefs. Who knows? Maybe they could be the evilest. Maybe all their lyrics just support Pol Pot. I doubt it, but they don't feel so evil. It's just rock and roll. This is like black and roll, but like way more traditional heavy metal, which a lot of people are just like melodic black metal, but it's got like this hollow space to it that's really contemplative, and it all sits in the groove, man. It's got a lot of grooviness, a lot of catchiness, but occasionally it dips into this really brooding nature, which is the most black metal part about it. It's got to have the grim quality, or else what's even the point? It's got some insanely powerful vocals, which the dude, whoever the vocalist is just a machine here. He's just barking, and he's so aggressive. And it's shockingly well produced for being like second wave and from a country that like wasn't given a lot of exposure for black metal. It sounds really awesome. I don't know who produced this thing, but like, kudos to you. There's a guitar solo on the track Like the Wolf's Skin, which is just so good. This has got some of the best guitar parts of any black metal. And it's not a black metal release where you get a lot of blast beats. I think there might not even be any on here. There's a bit of doominess. It's a lot of heavy metal nature here. It feels like just really heavy rock and roll with a little more of a distorted chainsaw style of guitar tone. But like, you could tell just how like It's kind of ominous and kind of creepy, but at the same time, it's awesome. It's really awesome. It's great. It's something you guys really got to check out. It's a hidden black metal gem here, and no one's ever talking about it. And I'm glad I get to talk about it. And now we're talking about a guy I'd never got a chance to talk about before because I don't really know his stuff. But this is the guy known as BSOD, behind the project Heroin Makes Happy, with his band that actually sold a few records, Grozomkite. If you guys don't know, BSOD is this dude from like Germany or something, and he just did so many drugs in his life, and he made some of the weirdest black metal and the weirdest dark ambient folk projects. He's got a black metal cover of a Zombie by the Cranberries, which just expect like the Cranberries if it's on like a really hollow, thin black metal tone, and he's like singing it, and it's like hollow and even more rawly produced, which is actually a really interesting take. Total divergence here of this song, by the way, this cover of the Zombie by the Cranberries, but it's kind of hilarious, but kind of awesome. It's like, it feels more devastated by war. I don't know what it is. And on a similar note, I'm just going to plug real quick, Mutilation's cover of My Way by Frank Sinatra is like the freaking best thing I ever heard in my life. But Grozomkite, which one are we even covering here? I forget the name of it. Is Nostalgia Occultes Blut. This thing is so raw, Gordon Ramsay would be like having a fit if he saw this thing. Like, you cut into this thing and there are maggots in it. There's loud keyboards. It's not even like red. It's like purple at this point. And it's just like so dense. Imagine if it's like dark and like hard as a rock, like really dry. That's what it is here. It's too raw. Grozomkite is known for just the filthiest, rawest freaking black metal anywhere that you could find it. It's like so stupidly raw that it's like, why even you don't even want to touch it. But that being said, it's got some really good composition underneath the whole thing. If you can hear it, holy crap, you can't hear anything on this thing. This is the worst sounding black metal release I've ever heard in my life. It's a full-length album. This dude has demos and albums, and he went through the transition. He did all the phases, and he said, I got money to make an album, and he just didn't use it. Had to cut some footage. I just made some wild accusations towards this man's usage of his production money and whether or not he spent it on actual production, or if it was even production at all. Maybe he was just made a CDR, and he's like, hey guys, I got a freaking album out here. It's an album on a CDR, which, you know, I mean, bootlegging your own stuff, does it get any more cult than that? I couldn't tell you. I'm not European. Apparently Americans have no agency in black metal. But this thing's symphonic and it sucks. It seriously sucks. It sounds so bad. I give it a poor. But Grozomkite actually has a demo known as Stardust, which is way better sounding. It's still raw. It's still like filthy raw. Too raw for many people. But sounds like really awesome. I'm just really thankful that like it took me like 5 seconds to find a better release. Everyone on YouTube seems to support Nostalgia Occultes Blut. I don't. I didn't even look at my notes because I remembered I was like, all I could get from it was that it sounded bad and the symphonic stuff crushed the whole mix. The whole mix crushed. But Stardust, awesome. It's got better riffs. It sounds awesome. That's the one you should listen to. Next release is a new release. It's one that happened this year. It's Afski with Hundrede R. Do you like Drutk or Druth? Do you wish they were Danish? Here's Afski. That's the album. Especially if we're talking about Autumn Aurora, where nothing gets any more than like that is Atmo Black. Here's a heaping serving of Atmo Black. I don't care what folk is in there. I don't care. It's as Atmo Black as it gets. Just a brick wall of leaves and a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of this, that. That's Afski for you. And I'm going to cut this one real short. People are kind of hating on it, saying it's too repetitive, too much the same, blah, blah, blah. And they're right. It's so repetitive. It's so much the same. But it's one of those Atmo Black albums that just comes out and it sounds kind of nice. And you're like, you know what? Totally works for what it is. It's not changing anything. It's not doing anything new. The tracks are all a little bit different. I can honestly say they all have a little bit of identity to each of them. Not a ton, but it's enough for me. I say it's great. You know, I think it's a great listening experience more than anything. Maybe you could argue it's not a great album, but I think it is a great listening experience. And for me, that's what matters. Because as elitist as I am, I'm not going to sit here pissing myself being like, oh, this is the same stuff. If I like it, I'm going to be zoning out. And if I'm zoning out because it's good, then that's good. And if I'm zoning out because it's great, then it's Afski's latest album. And next we get Thou Art Lord with Eosphoros, another Greek album here. And with this one, I'm starting to realize a pattern with the Greek projects. They don't really like sticking to black metal. They like being other things a whole lot. This one's certainly influenced by death metal. Death metal is cool because it's got a really thick production style. It's really heavy, it's really dense. Now what do you do if you get that thick production style and really garbage Eastern European metal, black metal production? You get this. It sounds kind of hollow. That being said, the riffs are dope, the progression is dope, the vocals kind of blow. Two vocalists, neither's that great. One's more death leaning. This album cover really blows. This thing looks terrible. But that being said, it's pretty cool. It's essential. It's certainly essential. It was not an unenjoyable experience listening to this thing. It's just not amazing. You get a cool blend of like more black metal style riffing and more death metal responses to like the call that the black metal was doing. And I think that's like pretty cool. You know, it's not super crazy to think of. I mean, I just explained it in like 5 seconds right here without a lick of theory knowledge. But, you know, I mean, it works decently enough. I think it's good, but I think there's a project that's better, and it's from the same country. It's Burial Hordes with Incendium. It's a little more death metal influence, and it's just produced a little bit better, and I think it's just a bit more crushing. And it's also really ominous, which is what I like about it a lot. Not too complicated, but I think that one's kind of great. And after that, we're covering Needhog with Ravens Over the Road of Kings. This is like the 7th or 8th DSPM thing to ever exist, and it was a band that didn't release much. It was just kind of a demo and kind of done. It's one of the first DSPM releases ever, and this one's justification for DSPM, I don't love necessarily. It just kind of has a very repetitive style going for it here, which DSPM pulls a lot from. It makes Atmo Black look like war metal, with just how sluggish it could sound. Yeah, I wish I could use the argument of it's Finnish, so it's automatically good, but can't in this case because most Finnish bands have more interesting riffs than this one. This one's a kind of derivative. It's very Darkthrone inspired, especially something like Transylvanian Hunger, where the riffs are like really washed out, but like very repetitive yet kind of good. There's a little bit of bass presence, which I like. I think the lead guitarist is ultimately lacking a bit of presence, but the album is kind of heavy overall. It's kind of an overbearing thing here. I think it would maybe influence a band like Shining later on after listening to a bit more of their work, but I think it's good. But got one in the chamber for that one. Another band, a Icelandic band, a band that is actually known for post-rock, Solstafir. Yeah, I pulled out a Wyatt X hymn essential here, except this is Einordri, I believe. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's one of the origins of DSPM as well. But this one gets kind of overshadowed by the fact that the band doesn't even make metal anymore. I mean, they do post-metal, but they do a lot of post-rock too. And you kind of get it on this really warped, really cleanly produced for a demo. Kind of sketchy how well they produced a demo back in that day. Like, that doesn't feel allowed. Like 1993, most music was like this clean anywhere in the world. Like, official releases were this clean, man. But this one sounds good. Riffs are repetitive, but they're really dark and doomy and freaking upsetting. But I think it's great. I think it's a great little demo. And now we're covering a popular band's less popular pick, Immortal, Damned in Black, sandwiched in between Sons of Northern Darkness on the front end and Heart of Winter at the back end. Two of the most highly regarded Immortal albums, up there with the classic Pure Holocaust. I saw a dude recently who said that the debut of Immortal was one of his favorites, tied with Battles in the North or something like that. Battles in the North is really good. That debut is like not that good. But we're talking about Damned in Black here. Damned in Black is interesting because it was the first two songs were a bit of a letdown. One of those being Wrath from Above. But they didn't hit exactly what Sons of Northern Darkness does really well, and that's just like the amazing black metal riffs. You get a little bit more thrash metal influence here, a bit more wild nature to the whole thing. This is probably my least favorite of the three ending albums of this band's career before they all kind of disbanded. I know Immortal's still going. I mean, Abath, them stopped making albums until 2012, where Abath wasn't even there. And I guess 2007, when they made an album that like no one likes. I think both Horg and Abath are beasts at what they do, but they're also both a degree less interesting than they normally are here, which is a bit of a shame, because I like their work a lot. on other albums a lot more. But that being said, that's really only true for the first 2 tracks, which are both solid. They have a really good speed to them. They just don't have the interesting tom fills that Horg really has. They don't have the amazing riffs that Abbott does. That being said, once you reach like track 3, the album ramps up, it gets even faster, which, I mean, if this album's got nothing going for it, it's got speed. There's some really chunky staccato, like breakdown-esque moments, which sounds sick. I know they get into that a lot more in Sons of Northern Darkness, and admittedly, they could do it better, but here, it still sounds sick. It's pretty innovative. Not a lot of longer tracks here. The last track here, though, the title track, Damned in Black, is just under 7 minutes. It's progressive, it's layered, it's maybe the only, like, clean guitar part on the album, maybe? There are not a lot of clean guitar parts on here, or at least the, like, chorus-filled guitar sound that it goes for a lot, but I think that one's a real banger. If you're going to listen to one song from this album, it's that one. And I know I sounded like I didn't love this album that much, but Immortal is one of my favorite bands ever. I think this is great. It's just like not as good as their other stuff. And after that, we have a Les Legion Noir classic. This is Vlad Tepes and Belketra's March to the Black Holocaust. Crazy stuff. I don't cover a lot of splits on this channel because they're just annoying to cover. But here's the thing. The sides differ a bit in quality. They differ certainly in style, so I'm going to break that down a bit. The Vlad Tepes side, the opening one, is a bit more heavy metal, more driving riff style, and the Belketra side is darker, bleaker, it's sluggish, even doomy at points. What sucks about this thing is you have to assemble it online. It doesn't really just exist in one video. The link on Rate Your Music is just for the Vlad Tepes side, even though the Belketra side is a little bit better. Most people say it's a lot better, but I think the Vlad Tepes side is very underrated. I like the heavy metal stuff. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of melodic death metal, but I think that version of melodic black metal is really cool, actually, because it actually kind of gets a little bit heavier in a way. The Vlad Tepes side is coated in swank beats and thrashiness, and it's really heavy and cool. And it's got goblin vocals. I love goblin vocals. The Belketra side is sharp and intense. It sounds like actual murder. It's got a really sick vocal delivery, and like rhythmically, it's actually like really cool. The way he'll like growl at like different times over like the beat, it works really well. It's not just like a long, mournful screech, and then he just like slowly does some words. I think a lot of black metal vocals are kind of just wherever, but here, it's where it exactly needs to be. Yeah, sure, the Belketra side is better, but I think everything here is worth listening to and enjoying and buying a copy of. It's kind of great. It's one of the few like real Les Legion Noir releases that isn't just like some weird ambient thing or another demo, but it's a great split. It's certainly great. You gotta buy it, gotta listen to it. And the last release for the day, Paysage d'Hiver's Winterkalt. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our 15th album of the day, and it's super cool. We start a trend of Paysage d'Hiver releases being long. For their next 3 releases, which are the last ones we'll be talking about, they're long. So long. But that doesn't mean they're not awesome, because Winterkalt kind of takes that Crystalline Issa sound of like being so cold, and it gets even lonelier. It's like this big long journey. I listened to this one when I was walking home from work, and I was walking up and down. I took a longer path to get there, and it was just so overbearing. You get this nice horse clopping sound effect, and I'll be honest, Paysage d'Hiver is a band you need to be in the mood for. Very much you need to be in the mood for Winterkalt. It is a long album at about an hour and 11 minutes long. That and the next 2 demos are going to be super long. And then, shoot, if you reach Imwald, I guess, that one's 2 hours long. So you really got to absorb this thing. It's like really tough to absorb, but it is very much worth your time. It is the folkiest Paysage d'Hiver release because there are points of acoustic guitar. There's a synth flute in here, but don't think this is any funny business. It's weird because this feels like a very isolated release here. The flutes and that stuff is all folky, and that sort of evokes images of like a culture and like people, but it doesn't feel like there's anybody around. It's like a less hostile version of Care Care, where Care Care you feel like anything that could be out there is trying to kill you. In this one, you feel there is nothing there to love you, and you're wondering if there ever was. And if that doesn't convince you to listen to this thing, I don't know what will. But I got some actual notes. I've just been spitballing from what I remember. It is a depressing, isolating experience. You get these really grand, slow chord intervals that just shatter every time they change. It feels like a different section almost every time they hit a new chord. It is a very atmospheric release here, super doomy, but not as much doom metal as something like Steinik. But geez, you're missing out if you haven't heard Winter Call. That is maybe like, you could argue it's like the Paysage d'Hiver release because it's a long one. I wouldn't start with this one to get into the band, but if you were in the mood for it, it is one to listen to. And that is an interesting thing about Paysage d'Hiver. I don't know if I would listen to them on vinyl. It would sound very interesting, but I like the idea of listening to them on a car ride or listening to them on a walk because I think they're both very good for that. It is super atmospheric and depressing and isolating, and they all have a different atmosphere so far. And I've been loving this chart that I made myself. 15 bangers for you bozos out there. Hope you guys are enjoying this month so far. What have you guys found? What's good to you? What's interesting so far? What have you found that just blows? That's about it, though. I'd appreciate a like and subscribe, comments, questions, and concerns down in the comment section in the description. Also, down there, you'll find my Instagram, my Twitter, and my Discord. Come join my Discord. We're talking about nothing but black metal November right now, and we're having a ball. We're kind of having an awesome time. I know, like, you shouldn't have friends to be black metal or to be true or whatever, but I don't know. I got some homies on Discord, I guess you could say. That's it. Have a good day. Bye.